Welcome, everybody. Dr. James Beckett again here with Rich Klein for some sports card insights. Thanks, sponsors, Beckett Media, Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication, Compsy.com, Burbank, Mike Stadium Sports Cards, Heritage Auctions, Huggins and Scott Auctions, and Topps Panini and Upper Deck. A suggestion from Eddie Healy, who's been on before, a young attorney, was talking, what's all this about tough cards? Certain cards are tough. If something is a tough card, I think you and I should know about it. But not everybody knows about it. Once something is listed as an SP, then you can say, oh, okay, that's short print. But is that what Eddie's talking about? Is he talking about these mystical, mysterious cards that are on everybody's want list?
I think there's different definitions yesterday and today for tough cards. Yesterday, the definition were some of these short prints. I used to set up at shows. We all knew in New Jersey what the tough 67 high numbers were, because a lot of them seemed to be Mets. People like Sandy Alomar, the Shaw Sutherland 2-player rookie, and I put them at a $20 price tag. And people would say, look, Beckett listed at $4. And our standard response is, Beckett's address is 7510 Midcourt, Dallas, Texas, 75248. Please write to them to see if they have any available at that price for you. And how long have you been looking for that card? Oh, 3 years. You've been looking for 3 years. That tells you it's a tough card. Then somebody finally gets it, because in those days, those cards were much cheaper and the whole universe was cheaper. Today, you can go on eBay, and I bet you there's no shortage of 67 Topps Sandy Alomars on eBay. Yeah, you'll find it. But you may not find it at the price point you want. So I think today it's more price point related than true scarcity related, because the odds are, especially for the Topps and Bowmans and the more generally traded cards, they're available. But then the toughness is, do you want to pay that price? Now, when you did your Pete Rose tribute, you talked about the 63 French Bowers.
Yeah, French Bauer.
It's a really tough card.
It's barely even a card, but yeah.
It's barely even a card. It's a really tough item.
Yes.
That's a true, to this day, tough item.
My point was, you could put a bounty on it and you still might come up empty.
If you go to the National today and you don't see one of those items at the show, you know it's really a tough item. Where 35, 40 years ago, a tough item before the internet may have been something you don't get in your area. Your 71 Topps Al Weiss number 751 gets snapped up immediately because all the people working on their sets need that card because it's so tough.
So do you think we need to be talking about oddball tough cards or standard issue Topps kinds of mainstream manufacturer tough cards? Because there's two different approaches there.
I think both. When I say both, we talked about that I picked up that 63 Dalkowski at the last Dallas card show. Cool card. And it's still a tough card. You don't see a lot even on eBay. It's a tough card. I was very surprised when I looked at the Beckett price guide and saw the updated price. Okay. But that card's been tough for a while. I remember 8-9 years ago, I bought a lot on Net 54 of 63s because I saw that card included. It had been a while since I owned it. The price was like, okay, I'll buy the lot. And somebody moderating says, oh, so-and-so was interested in that card if you want to sell it immediately. And it's, no, I really don't want to sell it. I want to get the cards in my hand, see what I want to do with it. And sure enough, our friends at Beckett graded it for me. And I sold that card for what I paid for the whole lot of 63s because I knew how popular that card was. So there's still some cards that are tougher in the Topps Bowman era, but there are oddballs that are much harder. And those oddballs that are harder then are harder now. We've talked about this. If you go to the National and you're looking for something really difficult in the world of oddball, let's just say, and this is not really impossibly difficult, but it's difficult. 67 Red Sox sticker Yastrzemski. Very popular item in Boston. You may or may not find it at the National. And if you do, and you see it at the price point you want, and you've been looking for a while, you should just buy it and not think, oh, I'll be back, because the odds are the next person buys that item. So those are the two different ways I look at tough cards. And some tough cards nowadays get different because now with manufactured short prints, what was tough to us that we learned from our knowledge is now manufactured tough from the card company. So there's even a third way of looking at it.
Okay, Rich, I've got another dimension of it because I maybe have a fourth way of looking at it. But there are tough cards that back in the day, 40, 50 years ago, they were so tough that dealers wouldn't even put them out because the price was not ripe. It was much tougher than what you could get for it. And you thought, I'm just going to set it aside. I don't want to sell it for cheap because I know how tough it was to get. So when you didn't see it at the National or at a big show, it wasn't because it wasn't there. It was because the public had not caught on how tough it was. And so instead of putting it out, that's why we had difficulty in doing the price guides, because the price would be frozen in a sense, or there'd be perception that, hey, the price is the price. And we've had no activity on that card for the whole year. Then what do? People aren't going to put it out until the price gets, that's how, when prices go up, more of these tough cards.
I was pointing out with the 67s, we put them out for $20 when the book price was $5. If you're a really savvy dealer, you can also put it out at a price point higher than the book says. And if people are interested and start buying that card, wait a second, okay, now we have reported sales higher than it was, which is how that gets done. You talked the story. You had those great series of podcasts with the gentleman who researched, and he did the book on 4849 leaf. You completed the 4849 leaf set before people even knew there were those other 49 cards.
I didn't even know what they were, but I stumbled on to maybe a half of the short print set, and then I just gradually pieced it together, and it was tough. The perception was, it's like the green and red PMGs from the late 90s. When they first came out, they were too unusual and too scarce. They were case hits, and people didn't put them out because the perception of the value, the hobby was not mature enough in those days to think that these it'd be outrageous to think maybe even a 4-figure card, much less a 5-figure card, 6-figure card, 7-figure card if it's Michael Jordan. The other thing is, back in the old days, you had a situation where a card could be tough because none of the dealers had dupes of that card. They may have it, but if they had it, they weren't going to let go. It was the last card they needed for their set. And it's been a recurring nightmare for collectors, not even starting with Napoleon Lack, where card manufacturers withheld one card so the kid couldn't get the complete set. That happened in the 20s, happened in the 30s, and it continues probably to this day. But when you have mainly complete set collectors, they might find one in their lifetime. They weren't going to find two usually, and so they never were in the flow. And that made it really difficult for us doing price guides to try to extrapolate. We wanted empirical data as much as we could, but if something hadn't sold, that sometimes was an indication that it's undervalued. And we need dealers like you and your buddies up there in New Jersey that were saying, here's what the price guide says, but this is our experience, and we're going to test that. If people walked on by the $20 Alomar, then you would have said, maybe that's too steep. But deep down, you knew these were tough cards, and there were huge regional premiums in those days before people were traveling to shows all over the country and the internet and all that.
I remember I would call dealers in the mid-late 90s, and I remember one dealer told a printing plate of something and says, we have to wait until Becca priced the card before we get it out. And I said, it's a one of one. The only way we're going to be able to put a price is you have to tell me what you're selling it for. I can't tell you what to ask for it since we don't have any data on it. If you put $100 and you don't sell it, okay, that's good. If you put $500 and you don't sell it, that's good. If you put $50 and you don't sell it, it's good. If you put $50 and you sell it, it's good. I remember that conversation. I almost wanted to bang my head against the desk during that conversation.
No, the problem is if you put a low price on it and it sells to the very first person that walks up, then you think, oops. And so I think the theory sometimes is to start too high. On the other hand, you offend people if you charge too much. Your interchange with your potential customer, you weren't belligerent. You were saying, this is our experience. Go find it somewhere else. You may wind up coming back because it is a tougher card.
Our mutual friend, Bo Spencer Thompson, 1 Million Cubs, doesn't have as much experience as we do. So he'll find deals and he'll put them on eBay. And one thing I've learned from listening to his webcasts is he says if he gets an offer, almost immediately after he puts up a card, he knows he's probably too low. Meaning that somebody's trying to sharpshoot him and then they're going for the jugular and he goes, oh, wait a second, they're going that quickly? Let me look up the price. And 75% of the time he realizes, I was too low and that person should have just bought it at that price.
That's my pet peeve, is when you've underpriced it and then they come in and make you a lowball offer off your already low price. When it's a good deal, it doesn't have to be a great deal, but in looking for the steal instead of the great deal or the good deal, people have lost things. But the perception of tough cards, once something is published, you have a reference point. When I think of tough cards, I think they're so tough, they're not even in the almanacs and the standard catalogs, and they're just not much known about them. You're in a situation where you're going to struggle to find information about it or know what the price is. You think, I'll just put it in an auction. If it's not a properly advertised auction to the right audience, it's liable to go really cheaply because it may be only one person knows really how tough it is.
That's how you and I look when we buy cards from the value boxes. We know what we're willing to pay based on various criteria of what we've sold cards for. We know what we've never seen before. If you've never seen it before, it's usually, okay, let's take a shot, especially when it's the lower prices of that. I've discovered most of the times when I've taken a shot, it usually pays off.
Usually, but if it's a $100 card, I'm going to do some research.
Yes.
If it's a dollar card, I'm just going to say, throw it in the stack. But tough cards, what you're saying is we have enough familiarity that we recognize what is most likely a tough card just by seeing it, knowing that we haven't seen it that much. So we're generally not looking it up. We have a feel for it. But I think the hobby is not even working toward that. It said, why learn something? Why have knowledge if everything is just a quick lookup away? And the answer is not everything is a quick lookup away because you got to know how to look it up because it might not be available, but something similar and you don't even know. So I think it's tricky if you get too reliant on your internet connection.
I'll give you a great example. Somebody is trying to do the work of Dick Gilkison and Ralph Nazaki, and they're doing a great job of an online baseball, football, hockey card, basketball card variation thing. And I get their updates. One of their updates was wonderful. I looked it up and I got to play a little in the ComC database and fix something, but they had the wrong card number for one of the two cards. So I sent it back and I said, you may want to fix your card number because it's wrong. They looked it up and said, yeah, thank you. Ronald Reagan would say in the 80s, trust but verify. And that's what we're doing with tough cards. We're trusting ourselves, but we're also verifying. And sometimes what's tough isn't as tough in a certain situation. Back in the days, dealers went to the St. Louis show because St. Louis got a ton of 67 high numbers from Topps. And they were easy there. St. Louis didn't get the 67 semi-high series. The first sale I made at the 84 National, some dealer from St. Louis bought every 67 semi-high card I had, and I had a good stack of them.
Hearsay, if you hear the same story from 100 people, does that mean it's true? Not necessarily. It may be the same story repeated 100 times, but there's a lot of hearsay in our industry, and I think just everybody knows. But you and I were in that position where we had to say, wait a minute, is it true? Can it be empirically verified or uncut sheet verified? Or can you go back in the old literature, the old catalogs? Because there has to be a reason. Otherwise, it could be a rumor or a false story that is just perpetuated.
There was a great thread on Net 54 a while ago about the final series of 67. And I kept saying, hey, there are 22 cards that show up more often. As it turned out, 11 of the 22 really show up more often. The easiest 11 is finally somebody went and did all the counting on eBay of all that. I think we agreed it was not just a slam dunk, but a Michael Jordan takeoff from the foul line slam dunk, that these cards are actually much easier. So sometimes it works reverse too. Hey, the proof is that these cards are really much easier.
There's more information out there. The problem is it's not all accurate, but a lot of it's accurate. To get a read on something, you ought to be able to try to figure it out, whether it's tough or not. There's some things that have high prices on that are not tough at all. Now, they could be a condition rarity, but I don't think that's what Eddie's talking about. When you get a strange card, what do you do? And there are more ways to look it up now than there ever have been in history. And that's a good thing. And if we have 10x the number of collectors, and hopefully not 10x the number of cards, we're going to need that ability to get things cataloged and identified and properly priced. People don't like to overpay. So a proper understanding of the scarcity is a good thing.
The man in the house of cards.